Every single night before bed, rich people write down one question in a journal. The one question that's been eating them alive all day. The question they're terrified to answer. The question that, if they're honest, they already know the answer to. And that's exactly why they write it down. I'm Henry Ford, and I'm about to show you why the richest people I knew did this every single night, and why the ones who didn't stay stuck forever. Most people think rich people have all the answers. They don't. What they have is the courage to ask themselves the questions everyone else is avoiding. You know that feeling when something's wrong but you don't want to look at it directly? That job that's slowly killing you. That business idea you're too scared to try. That relationship that ended months ago but you're both still pretending. Rich people stopped pretending. Not because they're braver, because they discovered a habit that forces honesty. And if you listen, if you really listen, you'll walk away from this knowing exactly what question you've been avoiding, and more importantly, what to do about it. This isn't theory. This is how it actually works. I learned it the hard way, in the dirt and oil of real life. Building automobiles wasn't just about machines. It was about understanding people, understanding decisions, understanding what separates those who build something real from those who spend their whole lives thinking about it. And the difference came down to one thing: honesty. The ability to ask yourself the question you're most afraid of. So, let's begin. Here's what nobody tells you about success. It's not about working harder. It's not about having more ideas. It's about being honest with yourself faster than everyone else. And most people can't do that. They lie to themselves for years, decades, their whole lives. Not big lies, small ones. The kind you tell yourself every morning when you look in the mirror. I'm fine, this is fine, everything's fine. But it's not fine, and you know it. Deep down you know exactly what's wrong. You know what needs to change. You know what decision you need to make. But knowing something and admitting something are two completely different things. You can know you're in the wrong career for 10 years. Just know it. Feel it every Monday morning when the alarm goes off. But as long as you never admit it to yourself, you don't have to do anything about it. That's the trap. And rich people figured out how to escape it. They write down the scary question every single night. The question they've been avoiding all day. And once it's on paper staring back at them, they can't unknow it anymore. They can't pretend they don't see it. The lie dies. And that's when everything changes. Listen to this every day for the next month. Each time you hear it, you'll catch something new, something you missed the first time. Because this goes against everything you've been taught. Your brain needs time to accept it, time to see that what you thought was protecting you was actually trapping you. There's this gap between knowing something and admitting something. And that gap is where most people stay stuck their entire lives. Think of it like this. Your life is a room full of doors. Behind each door is a truth you already know. You're in the wrong career. That business won't work. That relationship is over. You're afraid. You're wasting time. Each door has a clear sign on it. You can see the signs. You walk past these doors every single day, but you never open them. You just keep walking in circles in the same room. Knowing the doors are there, knowing what's behind them, but never opening them. Never stepping through. Because opening the door means you have to deal with what's on the other side. And dealing with it means change, discomfort, risk. So you stay in the room, walking in circles, year after year. The doors are right there, the answers are right there, but you won't open them. Rich people open the doors. That's the only difference. Okay, think about it. How many things do you know right now that you won't admit? You know if that relationship is working. You know if you're building something you actually care about. You know if you're wasting your time. You know if you're avoiding something important. You know if you're lying to yourself about your progress. You know. But you won't admit it, because admission requires action. If you admit you're in the wrong career, you have to do something about it. If you admit that business idea is never going to work, you have to let it go. If you admit you're scared, you have to face that fear. If you admit you've been wasting time, you have to change how you spend it. So you stay in the knowing phase, where you can see the problem but pretend you don't, where you can feel the pain but act like everything's fine, where you can understand what's wrong but avoid doing anything about it. And nothing changes. Years pass. Nothing changes. You get older. Nothing changes. You keep hoping something will shift, but hope without action is just another form of lying. Rich people I knew didn't have that gap. Or they did, but they made it as small as possible. They asked the scary question. They wrote it down. They forced admission. And once you admit something, you can't unknow it. The lie stops working. The excuse falls apart. The comfortable story you've been telling yourself loses its power. Let me give you an example. There was a man who worked at a competitor's factory. His name was William. Good worker, showed up every day, did his job, made decent money. But he was miserable. You could see it in his face, the way he walked, the way he talked about his work. There was no life in him, just going through the motions. One day I asked him what was wrong. He said nothing, everything's fine. But I pushed, and finally he admitted it. He said, I hate this job. I've hated it for 3 years, but I don't know what else to do. So I asked him a question. Have you ever written that down? Have you ever looked at the words, I hate this job on paper? He said, no. Why would I write that down? That just makes it real. And I said, exactly. That makes it real. And once it's real, you have to deal with it. You can't pretend anymore. You can't tell yourself it's not that bad. You can't keep waiting for it to get better. You have to face it. He didn't like that answer, walked away frustrated. But 2 weeks later, he came back. He said he'd been writing down the scary question every night, the question he'd been avoiding. What am I doing with my life? Why am I staying somewhere that makes me miserable? What am I afraid of? And the answers started coming. Clear answers, honest answers, answers that had been sitting there for 3 years but he wouldn't look at. Within a month, he quit that job, started his own small business. Nothing huge, just something he actually cared about, fixing machines for local shops. Made less money at first, but he wasn't miserable anymore. He woke up with purpose, with direction, with something that felt like his. That gap between knowing and admitting, writing the question closed it, fast. And once it closed, he couldn't go back, couldn't unknow what he'd admitted, had to move forward. Now here's what William told me 6 months later that changed everything I understood about wasted time. He said the scariest part wasn't quitting the job. The scariest part was realizing he'd wasted 3 years because he was too afraid to write down 4 words. I hate this job. 3 years of his life, gone, because he wouldn't spend 30 seconds being honest with himself. And he looked at me and said, how much more time would I have wasted if you hadn't pushed me? 5 years? 10 years? My whole life? That's when I realized something. The cost of avoiding a question isn't just the pain you're in now. It's all the years you'll stay in that pain, multiplied, growing, getting worse. Most people think about the cost of change. They never calculate the cost of staying the same. Okay, here's what's crazy about this. Your brain already knows the answer to every important question in your life. Right now. You know what needs to change. You know what you're avoiding. You know what decision you need to make. You know who you need to talk to. You know what risk you need to take. The answers are sitting there, right now, in your head. But your brain is also incredibly good at hiding answers from you, because answers require action, and action is scary. Action means change. Action means discomfort. Action means facing things you've been avoiding. So your brain keeps you busy, distracts you, fills your day with noise, meetings that don't matter, conversations that go nowhere, busy work that feels productive but moves nothing forward. Anything to avoid sitting still and facing the real question, the question you've been running from, the question that's been sitting there, waiting, getting louder every day. Rich people figured this out. They stopped running. They scheduled time to face the question, every night, right before bed, when they're tired and the defenses are down, when the busy work stops, when the distractions end, when there's nothing left but them and the truth. That's when they write it. Not the comfortable version of the question, the real version, the one that hurts, the one that scares them, the one they already know the answer to. And here's the key. They don't answer the question that night. They just write it. Close the journal, go to sleep. Because something happens while you sleep. Your subconscious mind works on problems. Your brain processes information while you're sleeping, makes connections, solves puzzles, figures things out. But most people never give it the real problems to work on. They avoid the scary questions during the day, fill their mind with noise and distraction, then wonder why they never have breakthrough insights, wonder why they stay stuck on the same problems for years, wonder why clarity never comes. It's because they never asked the real question, never gave their subconscious the real problem to solve. Rich people feed their subconscious the scariest question possible right before sleep. Give it the whole night to work, and when they wake up, the answer is usually sitting there, clear as day. Not because they got smarter overnight, because they finally stopped blocking what they already knew. The answer was always there, they just weren't ready to see it. But writing the question, sleeping on it, that creates readiness. That opens the door, and the answer walks through. But not all questions are equal. Some questions change everything. Others are just distractions disguised as deep thinking. Now let me tell you what kind of questions we're talking about. Because this isn't what do I want for breakfast. This isn't should I take this meeting or that meeting. These are questions that make your stomach hurt when you think about them. Questions that you push away the second they enter your mind. Questions like, am I building something I actually care about? Is this person actually right for me? Am I becoming who I want to be? What am I doing that I know is wrong? Why am I still pretending this is working? Am I wasting my life? What am I afraid of? Why do I avoid this decision? What would I do if I wasn't scared? These aren't comfortable questions. They're the ones that wake you up at 3 in the morning. The ones that sit in the back of your mind all day. The ones you distract yourself from with work, with entertainment, with anything that keeps you from thinking about them. But they're always there. Waiting, getting louder. And the longer you avoid them, the more power they have over you. The more they control your decisions, the more they keep you stuck. Here's how you know if a question is worth asking. Does it require you to change something if you answer honestly? If the answer is yes, it's a real question. If the answer is no, it's just mental exercise. Most people ask fake questions, questions that sound deep but require nothing. How can I be happier? That's fake. The real version is, what am I doing every day that makes me unhappy? How can I be more successful? Fake. Real version, am I working on things that actually matter? See the difference? Fake questions let you stay comfortable. Real questions force you to change. And change is exactly what most people are avoiding. There was a woman I knew who owned a small factory, made textiles. Her name was Catherine. Smart, hard-working, determined, but struggling. Her business was barely breaking even, month after month, year after year. Just enough to keep the doors open, but never enough to really grow. Never enough to feel secure. And she kept trying to fix it by working more hours, cutting costs, pushing harder, doing everything herself because she couldn't afford to hire help. But nothing worked. The harder she worked, the more stuck she felt. One day she told me about this habit, writing down the scary question. And I asked her, "What's the question you're avoiding?" She went quiet, looked away. Then she said, "I think I'm making the wrong product." I said, "Do you think that or do you know that?" She looked at me and she said, "I know that. I've known it for over a year. But I've already invested so much money and time. If I admit it's the wrong product, all of that was wasted. All those months, all that money, all that effort, gone." And I said, "It's only wasted if you keep going. If you stop now and build the right thing, that was just learning. That was just figuring out what doesn't work so you can build what does. But if you keep going on the wrong path just because you've already gone far, that's when it's truly wasted." She didn't like that answer. Nobody does. But she thought about it, and that night she wrote the question down. Am I making the wrong product? Just that. Nothing else. And the next morning she woke up and knew. Yes, it was the wrong product. She'd known for over a year but wouldn't admit it. So she pivoted, changed everything, shut down production of the old product, spent weeks designing something new, something people actually wanted, something that solved a real problem instead of just being easy to make. And her business turned around. Within 6 months, she was profitable, really profitable. Within a year, she'd made back everything she lost. But none of that happens if she doesn't write the question, if she doesn't admit what she already knows. She'd still be there, 5 years later, 10 years later, working herself to death on the wrong product, wondering why success never comes. Now here's what Catherine told me that reveals the real reason most people never ask the scary question. She said the hardest part wasn't changing the product. The hardest part was admitting she'd been wrong for over a year. That she'd wasted time and money on something she knew wasn't working. She said, I kept thinking if I just worked harder, if I just pushed more, I could make it work. But hard work on the wrong thing is just a slow way to fail. And admitting that felt like admitting I was stupid, that I'd been fooling myself, that everyone who doubted me was right. That's what I was really avoiding, not the decision to change, the feeling of being wrong. And that's what keeps most people stuck. They'd rather fail slowly than admit they were wrong quickly. Pride costs more than any business mistake ever will. So why don't rich people talk about this? Why is this hidden? If it works so well, why isn't everyone doing it? Because it sounds dark. Imagine telling people your nightly routine is confronting your deepest fears, writing down what scares you most, facing what you've been avoiding, admitting what you've been lying about. They think you're depressed. They think something's wrong with you. They'd worry about you. They'd suggest rest or medicine or taking time off. So rich people just don't mention it. They talk about their morning routine, their exercise, their reading, but they leave out the part where they force themselves to be honest every night, where they write down the one thing they're most afraid to admit, where they confront the lie they've been living. And here's the other thing. This habit is uncomfortable as hell. It doesn't make you feel good, at least not at first. It makes you feel worse, because you're finally looking at the thing you've been avoiding. You're finally admitting what you've been denying. You're finally facing what you've been running from. And that hurts. Most people want habits that make them feel better, calm, peaceful, happy, relaxed. They want habits that make life easier, that reduce pain, that create comfort. This habit does the opposite. It creates discomfort, on purpose. It brings up things you'd rather not think about, forces you to face things you'd rather avoid, makes you admit things you'd rather deny. But that discomfort leads to clarity, and clarity leads to action, and action leads to change, and change leads to the life you actually want. But you have to go through the discomfort first. You have to face what you've been avoiding. You have to admit what you've been denying, and most people won't. They'd rather stay comfortable and stuck than uncomfortable and moving forward. That's the difference. Rich people chose discomfort, not because they liked it, not because they enjoyed pain, because they knew what was on the other side of it. They knew that temporary discomfort leads to permanent change, while temporary comfort leads to permanent regret. But there's a deeper reason rich people keep this hidden, and it has to do with competition. If everyone started asking themselves the scary questions, if everyone started being brutally honest about what's working and what's not, if everyone started making changes based on truth instead of hope, the advantage disappears. Right now, most people lie to themselves. They stay in bad situations. They work on wrong things. They avoid hard truths. And that creates opportunity for the people who don't. The people who ask the scary questions move faster, see clearer, make better decisions. While everyone else is pretending everything's fine, they're fixing what's broken. While everyone else is hoping things get better, they're making things better. That's competitive advantage. And you don't advertise your advantages. You use them. Let me tell you what happened after I started this habit. The first week was terrible. Truly terrible. I'd sit down at night to write the scary question and my brain would go blank. Or it would give me fake questions. Comfortable questions disguised as real ones. Questions that sounded deep but weren't actually scary. Like, how can I grow my business faster? That's not a scary question. That's a comfortable question. The scary version would be, am I even building the right business? Or, how can I be more productive? That's not scary. The scary version is, am I busy or am I productive? Am I doing things that matter or just things that feel like work? It took me days to get to the real questions. My brain resisted hard. Because real questions require real answers, and real answers require real change, real discomfort, real risk. But I kept pushing, kept sitting down every night, kept forcing myself to go deeper, to ask the real question, not the comfortable version, the scary version. And eventually the real questions started coming. Questions I'd been avoiding for months, some for years. Am I treating people the way I'd want to be treated? Am I so focused on building the business that I'm losing everything else? Am I building something that actually matters or just something that makes money? Am I becoming someone I actually like? These questions hurt, really hurt, but they were real. And once I started asking them, once I started admitting the answers, everything changed. My business got better. My relationships got better. My decisions got clearer. My whole life got more focused. Not because I suddenly had all the answers, because I stopped pretending I didn't already know them. But in week 3, something happened that almost made me quit this habit forever. I wrote a question that I wasn't ready to answer. A question so painful, so cutting, that I wanted to rip the page out and burn it. The question was, do the people closest to me actually respect me, or are they just afraid to lose their jobs? And I sat there staring at that question. And I knew some of them were just afraid. I'd built a company where people were scared to tell me the truth, where they smiled and agreed because I signed their checks, not because they respected me, because they needed me. And seeing that about myself, about what I'd created, felt like being punched in the chest. That's what this habit does. It shows you things about yourself you don't want to see. So what actually happens when you start writing the scary question every night? Let me walk you through it. Because it's not what you think. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. But it works. Week 1, you sit down to write, and immediately you want to avoid it. Your brain gives you every excuse. I'm too tired. I'll do it tomorrow. This is pointless. What's the point? I don't have time. I don't know what to write. Nothing's really bothering me. All lies. All avoidance. You have to push through that. Just write something. Anything. Even if it feels fake at first. Even if the question doesn't feel that scary. Just write it. Get in the habit of sitting down every night and facing the page. Close the journal. Go to sleep. Don't think about it. Don't try to answer it. Just sleep. Week 2. The resistance gets stronger. Your brain really doesn't want to do this because it knows what's coming. Real questions, real answers, real change. So it fights harder. You'll forget. You'll fall asleep without writing. You'll tell yourself you'll do it in the morning instead. You'll convince yourself you're too tired, too busy, too overwhelmed. Don't fall for it. Night is when this works. When you're tired, when your defenses are down, when the day is over and there's nothing left to hide behind. That's when the truth comes out. Not the comfortable version, the real version. Week 3, something shifts. You start writing actual scary questions. Questions you've been avoiding for months, maybe years. Questions you didn't even know were sitting there. And it feels terrible and relieving at the same time. Terrible because you're finally admitting what you've known. Relieving because you're not carrying it alone anymore. It's on paper. It's real. It's out of your head. And somehow that makes it smaller, more manageable, less overwhelming. You realize that the things you were most afraid to admit aren't as scary when you look at them directly. The fear lives in the avoidance, in the shadow, in the not looking. But when you pull it into the light, when you write it down and see it clearly, it loses some of its power. Not all of it, but some. Week 4, the answers start coming. You wake up and just know things, clear things. Things you've been stuck on for years suddenly make sense. Decisions that felt impossible become obvious. Directions that were muddy become clear. Not because you got new information, not because someone gave you advice, not because you studied harder or thought more, because you stopped blocking the information you already had. Your subconscious has been working on these problems, has known the answers, but you weren't ready to hear them. Now you are, and they come through. After a month of this, people start making big changes, real changes, life-changing decisions. I saw it over and over. People quitting jobs they hated, jobs they'd been at for 5 years, 10 years, complaining every day but never leaving. Suddenly they leave, just like that. Ending relationships that were over, relationships where they'd been unhappy for years but staying out of comfort, out of fear, out of not wanting to be alone. Suddenly they ended. Starting businesses they'd been too scared to try, ideas they'd had for years but never acted on, risks they'd been avoiding. Suddenly they take them. Moving to new cities, making decisions they'd been putting off for years. And it's not because they suddenly became brave. It's not because they stopped being afraid. It's because they finally got honest. And once you're honest, staying in the wrong situation becomes impossible. The lie stops working. You can't tell yourself it's fine anymore. You can't pretend you don't know what to do. You can't keep waiting for the perfect time. You know the truth. And knowing the truth means you have a choice. Stay and choose misery while knowing you're choosing it. Or leave and face the fear of change. Either way, the comfortable denial is gone. Now let me give you a practical exercise. And I want you to do it right now. Not later, not tonight, right now. Take out a piece of paper and write down one question, the question you've been avoiding, the one that makes your stomach hurt when you think about it, the one you push away every time it comes up, the one you know the answer to but don't want to admit. Don't answer it, just write the question. Look at it, read it, let it be real. And tonight, right before you go to bed, read it again. Then close your eyes and go to sleep. Don't think about it. Don't try to solve it. Don't worry about what it means. Just sleep. Let your mind work on it. And tomorrow morning, pay attention to the first thought that comes into your head. That's probably your answer. The answer that was sitting there the whole time. The answer you already knew but wouldn't admit. And then here's the most important part. Do something about it. Take one step. Make one change. Have one conversation. Send one message. Make one decision. Whatever the answer tells you to do it. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until you have all the information. Just do it. Because this only works if you act. Writing the question without acting on the answer is just another form of lying to yourself. I'll tell you an example from my life. There was another man I knew. His name was Robert. Successful businessman. Had everything people said they wanted. Money, reputation, a big house. But when you talked to him, you could feel the emptiness, like he was performing a role instead of living a life. One evening at a business dinner, I watched him excuse himself early, said he had work to do. But I could see the truth in his face. He didn't want to go home. One day I pulled him aside and asked what was really going on. Took him a while to answer. Finally, he said his marriage was falling apart. They barely talked anymore, just existed in the same house, passing each other like strangers. And I could see the pain in his face. So I asked him the question, have you written down what you're really afraid of? About the marriage? About the situation? About what you're avoiding? He said, no. What do you mean? I said, there's a question you're not asking, about your marriage, about why you're staying, about what you really want. What is it? He went quiet for a long time, just stared at the ground. Then he said, I think the question is, do I even want to fix this? Or am I just staying because leaving is harder? And the second he said it out loud, he knew. He was staying because leaving felt harder than staying, not because the marriage was good, not because he loved her, not because he wanted to fix it. Because leaving required courage he didn't think he had, required facing the judgment of others, required starting over, required admitting he'd failed. and all of that felt harder than just staying miserable. I told him to write that question down. Every night. For a week. Don't answer it. Don't make any decisions. Just write it and sleep on it. Let your mind work on it. He did. And by the end of the week, he knew what to do. He sat down with his wife, had the real conversation, the one they'd been avoiding for years, the one where they admitted the truth, that they were both unhappy, that they'd both been staying out of fear, that the marriage was over and had been for a long time, and they decided together to end it, to move on, to stop wasting each other's time. And it was hard, really hard, painful, messy, complicated. But 6 months later, Robert came back to see me, and he looked different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. He said writing that question, admitting what he already knew, facing what he'd been avoiding, was the hardest and best thing he'd ever done. Because he stopped wasting time pretending, stopped lying to himself, stopped choosing comfort over truth. And that freed him to actually build a life he wanted, not a life he was just ensuring. Now let me show you why business questions are often easier to face than personal ones, and what that reveals about the lies we tell ourselves to avoid pain. Here's a question a lot of people avoid. Am I building the right thing? You pour months into a project, maybe years. You invest money, time, energy, pride, and somewhere deep down you start to suspect it's not working. It's not going to work. The market doesn't want it. The timing is off. The execution is wrong. Something is fundamentally broken. But you've already invested so much. Sunk cost. That's what they call it. So you keep going. You tell yourself it just needs more time, more money, more effort, more tweaking. Just one more adjustment and it'll work. But that's a lie. And you know it's a lie. Deep down you know. But you won't admit it. Because admitting it means all that time was wasted. All that money is gone. All that effort was for nothing. And that hurts. So you keep going, keep pushing, keep pretending, until you run out of money or time or energy or belief. And then you're forced to admit it. But by then, it's too late. I remember writing, is this automobile design actually better? Or am I just attached to it because it's mine? I'd been working on a specific design for months. It was complicated, technically impressive, expensive to build. And it wasn't working as well as I wanted. The parts kept breaking. The assembly took too long. The cost was too high. But I kept pushing, kept trying to make it work. Because I'd designed it. It was mine, my idea, my vision. And admitting it wasn't the right design meant admitting I was wrong, that I'd wasted months, that I'd led my team down the wrong path, and I didn't want to admit that. So I kept going, kept tweaking, kept adjusting, kept telling myself it just needed one more change. But that night, sitting in my office, I wrote the question, is this design actually better, or am I just too stubborn to let it go? And the next morning I knew. It wasn't better. It was just mine. And being mine didn't make it right. So I scrapped it. Threw away months of work, started over, built something simpler, something that actually worked, something that could be built quickly and cheaply and reliably. And that became the Model T, the car that changed everything, the car that made automobiles affordable for regular people, the car that built my entire company. But it almost didn't exist, because I almost stayed stuck on the wrong design, just because I couldn't admit I was wrong, just because I was too proud to start over. That one question saved everything. But what I learned from scrapping that design taught me something about failure that most people never understand. Failure isn't the problem. Staying attached to failure is the problem. Every successful person fails. The difference is how long they stay attached to what doesn't work. Most people hold on for years. They keep feeding a dying project because letting it die feels like admitting defeat. But successful people kill failing projects fast, not because they don't care, because they care about what comes next more than they care about being right about what came before. The Model T exists because I was willing to admit the previous design was wrong. If I'd kept defending it, kept trying to make it work, I'd have wasted years on something that would never be great. and I'd have missed the chance to build something that was. There's this thing people do with failing projects. They throw good money after bad. Keep investing, keep pushing, keep trying, because stopping feels like admitting defeat, admitting failure, admitting they were wrong. So they keep going, even when it's obvious it's not working, even when everyone around them can see it's failing. They keep going, because they can't admit it, can't write the question, can't face the answer. But here's what rich people figured out. Stopping a bad project isn't defeat. It's clarity, it's honesty, it's wisdom. It's making space for something better. Every minute you spend on the wrong thing is a minute you can't spend on the right thing. Every dollar you invest in a failing project is a dollar you can't invest in something that works. But you have to admit it's wrong first. You have to ask the scary question. You have to face the answer. And most people won't. They'll ride that bad project into the ground, lose everything, waste years, just because they couldn't ask one question. Am I building the wrong thing? I saw a man once. Poured everything into a factory, literally everything. His savings, his time, his energy, his relationships. Wrong location, wrong product, wrong timing. Everything about it was wrong. But he wouldn't stop, wouldn't pivot, wouldn't admit it wasn't working. He just kept saying it needs one more year, just one more investment, just one more chance, and then it'll work. But it never worked. Year after year, losing money, losing time, losing everything. And the whole time you could see it in his face. He knew it wasn't working. He knew it was never going to work. But he couldn't admit it, couldn't write the question, couldn't face the answer. Because admitting it meant admitting he'd wasted years of his life, and he couldn't handle that. So he stayed, kept going, kept pretending, until finally he had nothing left. The factory closed. He lost everything. And only then did he admit it. Only when he had no choice, when there was nothing left to save. But by then it was too late. He'd lost 10 years. All his money, his health, his relationships, everything. And the tragedy wasn't that the project failed. Projects fail, that's normal. The tragedy was that he knew it was failing for years. He just wouldn't admit it, wouldn't ask the scary question, wouldn't face the truth. And that avoidance, that refusal to be honest with himself, cost him everything that mattered. Now let me show you the two questions that expose whether you're wasting your time or building something real. Here's another question people avoid. Where is my time actually going? Seems simple. Seems like something you should know. But most people won't look at it directly, won't track it, won't examine it. Because if you actually tracked your time for a week, if you wrote down every hour and what you did with it, you'd realize how much of it goes to nothing. Things that don't matter, things that don't move your life forward, things that don't bring you joy or purpose or progress, things you don't even enjoy, just things you do because you're avoiding something else. Social obligations you don't want to do but feel like you should. Meetings that accomplish nothing but make you feel busy. Hours in conversations that go nowhere. Hours watching things you forget immediately. Hours complaining about problems instead of solving them. Hours planning instead of doing. Hours busy but not productive. And admitting that means you have to change it. You have to say no. You have to cut things out. You have to face the fact that you've been wasting your most valuable resource. The one thing you can never get back. Time. So people just don't look. They stay busy. They stay distracted. They tell themselves they're doing their best. They tell themselves they don't have enough time. But that's not true. They have the same amount of time as everyone else. They're just spending it on things that don't matter. And they won't admit it. Because admitting it means taking responsibility. Means acknowledging that their life is the way it is because of their choices, not because of circumstances, not because of bad luck, not because they don't have opportunities, because of how they choose to spend their time, every single day. And that's uncomfortable. So they avoid the question. I wrote that question once. Where is my time actually going? And I forced myself to track it, every hour, for one full week. No lying. No pretending, no making myself look better than I was, just honest tracking. What am I actually doing with my time? And I was shocked, genuinely shocked. 30 hours that week went to things that didn't matter at all. things that moved nothing forward, meetings I didn't need to be in where nothing got decided, conversations that went in circles, reading reports that told me nothing new, checking on things that were already handled, busy work that made me feel productive but accomplished nothing, problems I'd already solved but kept revisiting because I didn't trust my team. 30 hours, in 1 week, gone, wasted. And I was the one who put them there. Nobody forced me. I chose it. Every single one of those hours I chose. Because I was avoiding the real work, the hard decisions, the scary conversations, the things that actually mattered but felt uncomfortable. So I used busy work as an excuse, as a way to feel productive without actually being productive. And seeing that on paper, seeing how much time I was wasting, seeing it written out clearly with no way to deny it, changed everything. I cut it all. Every unnecessary meeting, every pointless obligation, every conversation that didn't need to happen, every minute that wasn't moving something forward. And suddenly I had 30 hours back, every week. 30 hours to build, to think, to work on what actually mattered, to make real decisions, to solve real problems, to move real things forward. And my business transformed. Not because I worked harder, because I stopped wasting time on things that didn't matter. That's what asking the scary question does. It forces you to see what you're avoiding, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You have to deal with it. But there's an even scarier question than where your time goes. And it's the one question that controls every other decision in your life. Here's maybe the scariest question of all. What am I afraid of? Most people never ask that directly. They just live with fear in the background, controlling their decisions, controlling their choices, controlling their whole life. But they never name it, never look at it head on, never examine it clearly, because naming it makes it real, and real fear has to be dealt with, has to be faced, has to be confronted. So they just let it sit there, unnamed, unexamined, controlling everything. Every decision they make, every risk they don't take, every opportunity they pass up, every dream they abandon, all controlled by a fear they won't name. I remember the night I wrote, "What am I actually afraid of?" Just that. Simple question, but hard to answer. Because fear is good at hiding, good at disguising itself as something else, as logic, as being responsible, as being realistic, as being smart. But underneath all of that, it's just fear. So I forced myself to answer. Really answer. Not the comfortable answer, the real answer. I was afraid of failing publicly, afraid of people seeing me try something and fall flat, afraid of being wrong in front of everyone, afraid of looking stupid, afraid of people laughing, afraid of losing respect. All of that, just sitting there, controlling decisions I didn't even realize it was controlling. And seeing those words on paper, seeing my fears written out clearly, made them smaller somehow, less powerful. Because fear lives in the shadows, in the vague discomfort you feel but never examine, in the anxiety you carry but never name, in the worry that sits in the background of every decision. But when you pull it into the light, when you write it down and look at it directly, it loses its power. Not all of it. Fear is still fear. It's still uncomfortable, still challenging. But it's not this massive, overwhelming thing anymore. It's just a fear, a specific thing you can name and understand and work with. You realize most of your fears are just stories you're telling yourself, stories about what might happen, stories that usually aren't even true. And even the ones that are true, even the real risks, they're usually not as bad as you think, usually not as devastating as your brain makes them seem. Most people are controlled by fears they never name. They just feel the fear and let it stop them. Let it keep them small. Let it keep them stuck. Let it keep them from trying anything that matters, from taking any real risk, from building anything significant. They play it safe, stay comfortable, avoid anything that might not work, and they wonder why their life never changes, why opportunities never come, why success never arrives. It's because unnamed fear is running their life, and they're letting it. But rich people name the fear. Write it down, look at it directly, examine it, question it, and then do the thing anyway. Not because they're not afraid. They're afraid. Everyone's afraid. Fear is normal. It's human. It's part of taking risks. But they don't let the fear control them. They feel it, name it, understand it, and then move forward anyway. Because they know something most people don't. The fear of staying stuck is worse than the fear of trying and failing. The fear of wasting your life is worse than the fear of looking stupid. The fear of regret is worse than the fear of taking a risk. So they choose the productive fear over the destructive fear. They choose action over avoidance. They choose growth over comfort. And that makes all the difference. Now let me tell you about a young man who almost let unnamed fear destroy his entire future. There was a young man who worked at my factory. Bright kid, had good ideas. You could see it in how he worked, how he solved problems, how he thought about things differently than everyone else. His name was Samuel, but he never spoke up, never shared his ideas, never contributed in meetings, just did his job and went home, kept everything inside, and I could see it was eating at him. So one day I pulled him aside and asked why. Why don't you speak up? You clearly have thoughts. You clearly see things others don't. Why keep it all inside? He looked uncomfortable, looked away, finally said he didn't want to look stupid, didn't want people to think his ideas were bad, didn't want to be wrong in front of everyone. So I asked him, what's the worst that happens if you speak up and your idea is bad? He thought about it. He said, people might laugh. They might think I'm dumb. They might not take me seriously anymore. And I said, okay, and then what? Then what happens? He looked confused. I said, let's say that happens. Let's say you share an idea and people laugh. Then what? Does your life end? Do you get fired? Do you lose everything? He said no. I said, so one moment of embarrassment, one moment of discomfort, that's it. That's the worst that happens. One moment, and then it's over. People move on. They forget. Life continues. But if you never speak up, you lose every opportunity you might have had, every idea that might have worked, every connection you might have made, every chance to grow or contribute or matter. You're trading your whole future for avoiding one uncomfortable moment. Is that really worth it? He didn't like that answer. Nobody does. But he thought about it, really thought about it. And the next day he spoke up in a meeting, shared an idea about how to improve the production line. It wasn't perfect, it needed work, but it was good, it was thoughtful, and people listened. They asked questions, they built on it, they made it better. And that changed everything for him. Because he faced the fear, named it, realized it wasn't as big as he thought, realized the worst case scenario wasn't that bad, realized staying silent was worse than speaking up. And from that day forward he contributed, he shared, he grew, he became valuable, all because he asked the scary question, what am I afraid of? And then did the thing anyway. Now let me give you the second exercise. This one is harder than the first, but it's also the one that creates the most immediate change in people's lives. Here's your second exercise, and this one is more challenging than the first. Tonight, before you go to bed, write down this question. What would I do tomorrow if I wasn't afraid? Just that. Don't answer it tonight. Don't think about it. Don't analyze it. Just write the question. Close the journal. Go to sleep. Let your mind work on it overnight. But here's the key. Tomorrow, when you wake up, the first thought that comes into your head is probably your answer. That thing you'd do if fear wasn't stopping you. That conversation you'd have. That decision you'd make. That risk you'd take. That project you'd start. That person you'd call. That change you'd make. Pay attention to that first thought. Don't dismiss it. Don't push it away. Don't tell yourself it's impossible. Just acknowledge it. That's what you'd do if you weren't afraid. And here's what I want you to do. Do that thing. Not eventually, not someday, not when you feel ready. Tomorrow. Whatever that first thought tells you to do, do it. Even if it's small, even if it's just one step, even if it feels scary, do it. Make that phone call, send that letter, start that project, have that conversation, say that thing you've been holding back, take that risk, make that change. Whatever it is, do it. Because the gap between knowing what you should do and actually doing it is where most people spend their entire lives. Stuck, waiting, hoping, thinking about it, planning it, preparing for it, but never actually doing it. And this exercise closes that gap, fast, forces you to stop thinking and start doing, forces you to stop avoiding and start facing, forces you to stop waiting and start moving. Now let me show you what happens inside your brain when you finally admit something you've been avoiding. Here's the thing nobody tells you about admission. Once you admit something, really admit it, you can't go back. You can't unknow it. You can't pretend anymore. You can't unsee it. And that forces action. Not because you want to, not because you feel ready, because staying where you are becomes more painful than moving forward. Let me explain what I mean. As long as you never admit you're in the wrong career, you can stay there. You can tell yourself it's not that bad, it'll get better, you'll figure it out, you just need to be patient, give it more time, work harder, try different things. All comfortable lies that let you stay stuck without feeling bad about it. But the second you write down the question, the second you admit, I'm in the wrong career, everything changes. Because now you know, really know, not suspect, not wonder, know. And knowing means you have a choice, an actual choice you have to make. Stay and be miserable while knowing you're choosing it, knowing every day that you're choosing to stay somewhere that's wrong for you, knowing that you're wasting time, wasting life, wasting yourself. Or leave and face the fear of change, face the uncertainty, face the risk, face the discomfort of starting over. Either way, you can't pretend anymore. The comfortable lie is gone, the excuse is dead. You have to choose. And most people, when faced with that choice, when forced to actually choose, they leave. They make the change. Not because they suddenly got brave, because staying became impossible once they admitted the truth. Now let me tell you what separates people who tell the truth from people who lie to themselves. Here's what rich people figured out that most people never learn. Honesty isn't about telling other people the truth. That's easy. Anyone can tell other people the truth. Honesty is about telling yourself the truth. And that's the hardest thing in the world. Harder than any physical challenge. Harder than any business problem. Harder than any obstacle you'll face. Because you're the easiest person to lie to. You know exactly what you want to hear. You know exactly how to make excuses that sound reasonable. You know exactly how to justify decisions that are wrong. You know exactly how to avoid what you don't want to face. You know exactly how to make yourself feel better about staying stuck. And you do it all day, every day, without even realizing it. It's automatic, unconscious. Your brain is protecting you from discomfort by helping you avoid the truth, by giving you comfortable lies instead of uncomfortable reality, by letting you stay where you are instead of forcing you to change. But rich people stopped. They caught themselves. They noticed the lies. They recognized the avoidance. They saw the excuses for what they were. And they started asking the uncomfortable questions, started writing down what they were really thinking, really feeling, really avoiding, started forcing honesty on themselves even when it hurt, even when it was scary, even when it meant admitting they were wrong or failing or lost. And that changed everything. Not because the answers were new, the answers were always there, sitting there, waiting, obvious if they'd just looked. But they weren't looking. They were avoiding, pretending, lying. And once they stopped, once they started being honest, everything got clearer. Decisions that used to take weeks took days. Problems that used to feel overwhelming felt manageable. Directions that used to be muddy became obvious. Not because they got smarter, not because they learned new skills, not because circumstances changed, because they stopped lying, they stopped pretending, they stopped avoiding. They started seeing what was actually there instead of what they wished was there. Started dealing with reality instead of the comfortable story they'd been telling themselves. And once you start seeing reality clearly, once you stop distorting it to make yourself feel better, everything gets simpler. Not easier, simpler. Because you're not wasting energy maintaining lies anymore. You're not carrying around things you're pretending not to know. You're not avoiding decisions you know you need to make. You're just looking at what's real and dealing with it, making the hard choice, having the uncomfortable conversation, taking the scary step, facing what needs to be faced. And life gets better. Not comfortable. Better. More aligned. More honest. More real. Let me tell you what happened after I did this for a full year. After writing the scary question every single night for 12 months, my whole life looked different. Completely different. I'd made more real changes in that year than in the previous 5 years combined. Not because I suddenly got smarter, not because opportunities suddenly appeared, not because I suddenly got braver or more confident or more capable. Because I got honest, brutally honest, with myself, about what was working and what wasn't, about what I wanted and what I didn't, about what mattered and what didn't, about what I was avoiding and why. And that honesty forced action, forced change, forced growth. I ended business partnerships that weren't working. Partnerships where I'd been making excuses for months about why they weren't producing results. Partnerships where I knew, deep down, that the other person wasn't committed, but I didn't want to admit it. I ended them, had the hard conversation, moved on. I changed strategies I knew were wrong. Strategies I'd defended publicly but doubted privately. Strategies I'd invested time and money into but knew weren't working. I changed them, admitted I was wrong, started over. I admitted mistakes I'd been covering up. Mistakes where I'd blamed circumstances or other people but knew, deep down, they were my fault. My bad decisions, my poor judgment. I admitted them, took responsibility, learned from them. I faced fears I'd been avoiding. Fears about whether I was building something that mattered. Fears about whether success was worth what I was giving up. Fears about who I was becoming. I wrote them down, looked at them, dealt with them. And every single time, every single admission, every single moment of honesty, life got better. Not easier, better. More real, more aligned, more purposeful. Because I was finally building a life based on truth instead of comfortable lies. Based on what I actually wanted instead of what I thought I should want. Based on what actually mattered instead of what looked impressive. And here's what's crazy. The things I was most afraid to admit, the questions I avoided the hardest, the truths that scared me the most, those were always the most important ones. Always. The ones that changed everything. The ones that led to the biggest breakthroughs, the ones that unlocked the most growth. That's how you know you're asking the right question. If it scares you, if you want to avoid it, if your brain is giving you every excuse not to write it down, if you feel resistance, if you feel fear, if you feel discomfort, that's the question. That's the one you need to ask. That's the one with the power to change everything. But before you start this habit, you need to understand what it will cost you if you don't. Let me tell you what it costs to avoid the scary question. What it really costs. Not in abstract terms, in real terms. Things you can measure, things you can see, things that matter. It costs time. Every day you avoid admitting the truth is a day you can't move forward, can't make progress, can't build anything real. Every week you stay in the lie is a week you're not building the life you actually want. Every month you pretend is a month gone forever. Time doesn't wait. Time doesn't pause. Time doesn't care if you're ready or scared or confused. Time just passes. Every single day. Whether you use it or waste it. Whether you move forward or stay stuck. Whether you face the truth or avoid it. And you can't get it back. Ever. Those years you spent in the wrong career? Gone. Those months you spent on the failing project? Gone. Those weeks you spent avoiding the hard conversation? Gone. Forever. No do-overs, no second chances, no rewinding, just gone. And avoiding the scary question is how you waste it, how you trade your irreplaceable time for comfortable lies and temporary peace and avoiding discomfort. It costs money. Bad decisions cost money. Real money. Money you worked for. Money you need. Money that could be building something, or invested somewhere, or used for something that matters. Staying in the wrong business costs money. Keeping bad partnerships costs money. Avoiding problems until they get worse costs money. Pretending things are fine when they're not costs money. And you're making these bad decisions every day because you won't ask the scary question, because you won't admit what you already know, because you're choosing comfortable lies over uncomfortable truth. And those lies are expensive. It costs opportunity, real opportunity, the kind that doesn't come back. Every moment you spend on the wrong thing is a moment you can't spend on the right thing. Every relationship you stay in that's dead is blocking a relationship that might be alive. Every job you stay in that's wrong is blocking a job that might be right. Every project you keep pushing that's failing is blocking a project that might work. Every hour you spend maintaining a lie is an hour you can't spend building something real. Opportunity cost. Most people never calculate it, never think about what they're giving up by staying where they are. They just stay, keep doing what they're doing, keep avoiding what they're avoiding, and wonder why nothing good ever happens, why opportunities never come, why success never arrives, why their life never changes. It's because they're blocking opportunity by refusing to let go of what's not working, by refusing to admit the truth, by refusing to make space for something better. It costs peace, mental peace, emotional peace. Lying to yourself takes energy, real energy. Energy you can feel draining out of you, even if you don't know why. Pretending takes effort, constant effort. Maintaining the story, keeping the excuse alive, avoiding the truth. It's exhausting. You're spending energy every single day maintaining the lie. Energy you could be using to build something real, to move forward, to make progress, to solve problems, to create value. But instead you're using it to stay stuck, to keep pretending, to avoid discomfort. And that energy drain never stops. It's always there, in the background, making everything harder than it needs to be. And maybe worst of all, it costs respect, self-respect, the respect you have for yourself. When you lie to yourself, when you avoid what you know is true, when you pretend everything's fine when it's not, when you make excuses instead of changes, you lose respect for yourself. Maybe not consciously, maybe you don't even notice it happening, but it's happening. Every day, a little bit more, because you know. Deep down, you know you're lying. You know you're avoiding. You know you're choosing comfort over truth. You know you're staying stuck by choice. And that knowledge eats at you, quietly, constantly. You start to feel like a fake, like someone who talks but doesn't act, like someone who knows what to do but won't do it, like someone who's weak, like someone who's scared, like someone who's less than who they could be. And that feeling grows, day by day, until you can't even look at yourself in the mirror without feeling disappointed. That's what avoiding the scary question costs. Time, money, opportunity, peace, self-respect, everything that actually matters. Everything you can't buy back or replace or recover. That's the real cost. And most people pay it. Their whole lives. Come back to this tomorrow, and the day after. This is designed to be heard every day, because the principles get clearer each time. The truth gets more obvious. Your resistance gets weaker. Your excuses get less convincing. Your fear gets smaller. This goes against everything you've been taught, everything you believe, everything you've been doing. Your brain needs repetition to accept it, needs to hear it multiple times. Needs to see the logic over and over until it can't deny it anymore. Needs to feel the truth of it repeatedly until it becomes your truth. That's how change works. Not from hearing something once and understanding it intellectually. From hearing something repeatedly until it rewires how you think. Until it changes your automatic responses. Until it becomes part of how you see the world. So listen again tomorrow. Let these principles sink deeper. Let the questions become more real. Let the answers become more clear. And each time you listen, write down one question, one scary question, one thing you've been avoiding. Because this only works if you act. Understanding without action is just entertainment. Knowledge without application is just noise. You have to write the question, have to face the answer, have to take the step. That's where change happens. Not in the listening. in the doing. I'm going to tell you something most people won't understand, and that's fine. This isn't for most people. This is for the 5%. The ones who are tired of lying to themselves. The ones who are ready to face what they've been avoiding. The ones who know, deep down, that they're capable of more, but something's been holding them back. That something is usually just one question, one truth, one admission. Most people will hear this and do nothing. They'll go back to their lives tomorrow and avoid the same questions they've been avoiding for years. They'll keep lying to themselves, keep pretending, keep staying stuck, keep making excuses, keep waiting for the perfect time. And years from now, they'll wonder why their life didn't turn out how they wanted, why success never came, why happiness stayed just out of reach, why they feel like they wasted their potential. That's not you, or it doesn't have to be. You're hearing this for a reason. Something inside you knows there's a question you've been avoiding. Something inside you knows what you need to admit. Something inside you is ready for change. Trust that feeling, because it's right. Your mind knows, has always known. It's just waiting for you to be honest enough to listen. But here's the hard part, the uncomfortable part, the part most people can't handle. Knowing isn't enough. Understanding isn't enough. Feeling inspired isn't enough. You have to do something. Tonight. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when you feel ready. Tonight. Before you go to bed, write down the question. The one question you've been avoiding. The one that scares you. The one that makes your stomach hurt. The one you already know the answer to but don't want to admit. Just write it. Don't answer it. Don't solve it. Don't figure it all out. Just write the question. Look at it. Make it real. And go to sleep. Let your mind work on it. Let your brain process it overnight. And tomorrow morning, pay attention. The very first thought that comes into your head, that's probably your answer. And then do something about it. Take one step. Make one change. Have one conversation. Whatever the answer tells you to do it. Don't wait, because this only works if you act. The truth is simple. Rich people don't have better answers than you. They just stopped lying to themselves earlier. That's the whole difference. They asked the scary questions before waiting 10 years. They admitted the truth before it was too late to change. That's the only difference between them and everyone else. Not intelligence, not connections, not luck. Just honesty, with themselves, on paper, every single night. And that honesty leads to clarity, and clarity leads to action, and action leads to change, and change leads to the life you actually want. But you have to start. You have to write the question. You have to stop avoiding what you already know, and you have to do it tonight. Not someday, tonight, because someday never comes. Someday is just another lie you tell yourself to avoid the truth today, and you don't have time for more lies. You don't have time to waste. You don't have time to stay stuck. None of us do. So write the question, face the answer, take the action, and start building the life you know you're supposed to be living. The rest of your life starts tonight.